This is Techmodo, a Gizmodo series where we take a dive into some of the most recent tech news with some expert guests. This week, linguist Ben Zimmer talks to me about how the internet has taken over word of the year and how technology has changed the way we communicate. Congratulations, Gen Z, you win. You have officially gotten a bunch of linguists to crown ussy as word of the year. Yeah, you heard me. The American Dialect Society has named the suffix ussy as its 2022 word of the year. Ussy is, well, it comes from the word pussy, and it's combined with another word to describe some sort of orifice, like bussy, for example, which combines butt and pussy to describe, you know. Ussy is certainly a weird piece of English for a bunch of linguists to choose as a representation of 2022, but it does speak to a larger trend in the way that the internet and technology more broadly is changing the way we communicate IRL. See what I did there? I spoke to Ben Zimmer a little more about this. He's a columnist for the Wall Street Journal, a linguist, and the one who actually helped facilitate the ussy discussions with the American Dialect Society just a few weeks ago. What is the process of crowning a word of the year? How do you succinctly sum up a year of humanity in one word?
Yeah, well, you know, this is a process that the American Dialect Society has been doing ever since 1990, actually, and sort of gathering together at our annual meeting. And originally it was just, you know, a fun thing to do where, you know, Time has its person of the year, so why don't we have a word of the year? Ever since 1990, we've been, you know, anointing a winner just by having people make nominations in different categories and then voting to see, you know, which word of the year. Doesn't have to be brand new to the year, but it should be noteworthy and say something about how we're living these days and, you know, the zeitgeist of the past year.
How would you define ussy as a suffix and as word of the year?
You could talk about it as a suffix. Linguists also have a special term that they use called a libfix. That's basically, you know, we're often blending words together, taking a bit of word A and a bit of word B and combining them, also called a portmanteau. But sometimes those blend components can kind of like take on a life of their own. And so that's what we see here. So if you start with the word pussy and you start blending it with other words by just using ussy at the end of a word or word part, then that becomes productive. Yeah. So this is something that linguists like looking for. It's like, oh, you know, you can put any two words together, but if it starts producing all sorts of new forms, then something interesting is happening. And ussy really demonstrates that because, you know, even though, you know, it started, you know, well before this year, the way that people were using that ussy suffix and just combining it with just about anything, sometimes to indicate something that has, let's say, a hole or an aperture of some sort, cavity, something like that. But then it just kept growing, you know, thanks to social media, thanks to TikTok especially. People just started putting ussy at the end of everything, and it just sort of snowballed like that.
Yeah. How do you see the internet kind of creeping into linguistics and the trend of word of the year more broadly?
When you're looking for linguistic innovation these days, it's really these, you know, various kind of online channels of various kinds that it's really where the action is these days. And so, you know, a decade ago we might have been, you know, saying, oh, hashtag should be our word of the year because hashtags are becoming big on Twitter and so forth. And these days, again, with younger scholars especially paying attention to what's happening on TikTok and elsewhere, things do spread through, you know, funny or ironic memes very often, and people sort of pick up on something that they think is particularly clever or subversive maybe a little bit, and just run with it and play with it, add their own take on it. And so that's how language develops.
Do you have any perspective on how certain words or phrases stick and others don't on the internet?
Well, I think it's true, again, of language in general, even, you know, before the internet took off. I mean, it's certain factors have always come into play where, you know, a word to sort of take off, it needs to be memorable, it does need to sort of like stick with us. And very often the way that happens is by playing off of what we already know, what's already in our lexicon, sort of our mental dictionary. Occasionally you get something that's sort of brand new, you know, that isn't sort of based on something before. But our brains tend to sort of like latch onto things that we can recognize and understand when you're getting used to a new word or phrase that you've never encountered before. You need maybe a little explanation for what it means, especially if it's some sort of technical term. But if we're talking about sort of slang terms, other sort of informal, colloquial terms that spread previously face-to-face, now often mediated by the internet, then very often it's a case of sort of like taking something pre-existing and playing with it and sort of riffing off of previous things. Look for my Wall Street Journal column, which is called Word on the Street, every week in the review section of the Wall Street Journal. You can follow me on Twitter at BGZimmer and other social media where I post things I'm working on. Or go to benzimmer.com.
Cool. Awesome. Ben, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Honestly, including internet jargon was a great decision by the American Dialect Society. Maybe ussy isn't the most used slang in the world, but language is moving wicked fast these days as the internet becomes a crucible for different dialects. I mean, it's a silly picture, a bunch of scholars sitting around and discussing a meme suffix from the word pussy. But as much as boomers and those with a healthy internet real-world balance will disagree, language is language even if it's born on the internet. I mean, maybe it's cliche to say, but IRL and LOL are pretty much staples of American English at this point. Who's to say ussy isn't next? That's all I really got for you this week. Thanks for watching Techmodo. Check out more videos here on Gizmodo.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and check out other Gizmodo videos here on YouTube.